Do do do, theme song. Do do do, I'm broke, so this is my theme song. Do do do, just imagine this is an awesome theme song. Do do, theme song. Left of the box. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box. Bonjour, bienvenue. I'm Sandy. Yeah, I'm trying something a little bit different with my hair today. What do you think? What? Okay, I'm just a little bit happy, a little bit giddy. I got a shout out on the majority report today. Finally, it's like, oh my God, Sam actually remembers my name. And he's really bad at remembering names. I don't think I'm going to be keeping the toque on the entire show because it is kind of warm in here. But hey, what do you think? I think I make majority report look good. Just saying. Welcome everyone to the Sandbox. So far we have Mud Buds, Midi Doctor, Shade Dragon, Looney Tunes 9000, and Bad Lefty. It's great to see you all out. I wasn't actually thinking I was going to do a live stream tonight. There were things I wanted to get kind of caught up on. But then the majority report happened today. And it's the second time this week that somebody has called into the majority report to be like, hey, where are all the Canadians at? Yeah, the Canadian commentators, the Canadians news. There's issues up here. There's like horrible things happening up here that nobody is reporting on. And meanwhile, I'm like, I'm right here. Ah. Oh, trying to break through the algorithms though when you're doing leftist Canadian news. It's not easy. You see, I would be quite content if I had the same numbers that Rebel Media was getting, like Rebel News or True North and all that sort of stuff, all the right-wing Canadian media outlets. If I was getting those numbers, I'd be happy, but I'm not funded by right-wing money, so it's hard for me to get noticed in the algorithms. Oh, it looks like I was raided by the serfs. Yes, Shade Dragon, I said hi to you, and I can see you. Well, I see your name, but I don't see you. So thank you, serfs, for giving me a raid. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I have Canadian news to cover, partly inspired by the calls into the majority report. Part of my frustration is I have actually touched on those subjects before. I haven't gone in depth on the international student crisis thing that's happening, but I have talked plenty about the surge in racism up on this side of the border and how it's partly inspired by American right wing, influencing up here. Although it's not like we're completely guilt-free in that we have lots of our own, right-wing mentality seated within our culture, our history, our society, the foundation of this country, that it's not like we really need much influence from the states to be racist. It's just, they seem to be hyper-fueling it. There's a word that I'm trying to think of when you inject it with like extreme, what's the thing? I don't know. The United States is just making everything worse, is what I'm trying to say. They make everything worse. Shade Dragon saying, need an algorithm ice pick and rippy stompies on your algorithm shoes. Yeah. But, it is what it is. But I'm not going to keep the toque on the entire show. Like I said, it's kind of warm in here. Tea Flowers, I don't think I've seen you in here before. Welcome to the Sandbox. Asking, would a name change help? Something more indicative of Canada? I'm not changing Left of the Box. Left of the Box rocks. That name I came up with all on my own. And I love it. It has a certain je ne sais quoi. I don't know. It is just when I first thought of it, it just hit me, and I know it's something that I want to stick with because it's the whole idea of thinking outside the box, but to the left of it. Um, but I usually say like the catchphrase of my channel, if there is one, Canadian politics with sarcasm and sass. It's something I have a lot of. uh, and T Flower saying I was only showing your content because I watch Rev Trevor's. Oh, well, thank you, Rev Trevor's. I'm not entirely sure who that is, but thank you. I will have to investigate after this stream. Anyway, yes, Bad Lefty, I have truly made it. Sam Cedar remembers my name. But I don't know. I think the toque actually looks really good on me. Just if I'm being objective, I think it looks good on me, but it's kind of warm in here. I might put it back on later on in the show, but whew, yeah. Yeah. Giving me toque head. Is that a thing? Toque head? Toque hair? Toque hair? Is that And meanwhile, all the Americans are like, what the hell is she talking about? A toque. Oh. Okay, so first off, I wanted to just touch on a couple things about what's happening over in Gaza. I don't actually have a lot on it today. I do devote a fair bit of my time talking about what's happening over there. Um, and it's all horrible, is what it is. But I try to highlight aspects of it that aren't necessarily covered in other shows, or at least ones that I haven't seen. So one story in particular that I'm going to get into detail with is a Canadian connection. Yeah, because we have lots of connections. Canada and Israel is like, I don't know, the United States and Israel. Bosom buddies. Uh, uh, Con Artist Hill lost power at my house because of high winds, so I'm watching and eating dinner in the dark. Well, hopefully the glow of my pale skin is helping to bright your day. Oh. Yes, so to get on with some news that's happening in Gaza. That's the screen I want. I need to get rid of that other one. Anyway, this is the screen I want. And so Nikki Ashton is an MP, an NDP MP, and she's one of the better MPs, one of the good NDPs that are still left, and that's the New Democrat Party for those of you who don't know Canadian politics well. They're supposed to be the left-leaning party in Canada. There's not much in the way of a left-leaning party here in Canada anymore. I mention it all the time, but they've been a huge disappointment. They're in a position right now of a minority government, so they can pressure Justin Trudeau to do a lot of stuff. And really, all we've gotten is some milquetoast policies. There's a potential for a pharmacare deal coming out soon. I'm not reporting on it yet because I have yet to see the details of it. Because, they were all happy about like, ooh, we have universal dental care now. But then it turned out that it's all means tested and nowhere near universal. So they like to brag about things that aren't really as good as they want it to be. Like, it's still good that people who didn't get dental care before will now get it, but it's nowhere near what is needed. Anyway, on that little tangent, back to Nikki Ashton. She had tweeted out 75% of journalists killed in 2023 died in Israel's bombardment of Gaza. That's the highest rate of journalists killed since press freedom began keeping records. That's why I discussed with Cherie Para. Reminder, I am horrible with names. With Cherie, the importance of accurately reporting the horrors of war and genocide. And we have seen time and time again journalists in the Gaza Strip being targeted by Israel. They're trying to say that they avoid civilians at a much higher rate than all other wars. And that's what they keep on trying to say. And yet we know they're targeting journalists, and not just the individuals, but their entire families are being targeted. Anywhere these potential journalists could be is being targeted. And targeting journalists like that, also known as a war crime. And over, my country, Canada, Justin Trudeau will say, we support Israel's right to defend itself within humanitarian law, blah, 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 blah. Sure, every nation has the right to defend itself. However, Israel is not doing it within the restraints of humanitarian law. Not even close. So, I haven't actually listened to this yet, so we get to listen to this together. Let's see.
You've spoken out against Israel's brutal bombing of Gaza. You've faced an organized campaign of harassment that has impacted your work. If we're going to talk about journalism being under attack in the country and how we can support good, accurate journalism, we cannot ignore this reality. We need journalists who are going to speak up about what is happening in Palestine and Canada's role there. We were talking about an intense bombing campaign that has left roughly 30,000 Palestinians dead, mostly women and children. We also know that on average, 5 journalists or media workers are killed a week, the highest rate of journalist death since the Committee to Protect Journalists began recording this over 30 years ago. What can we do to create a climate where these voices are heard, where journalists don't rely on the passive voice to describe the death of Palestinians, where journalists don't have to fear losing their job for accurately reporting the horrors of war and genocide?
In Canada, like in the United States, there is a trend among mainstream media to, as of late, fire people with ties to Palestine, people who have been outspoken about Palestine and Gaza have been just let go of their jobs. Some people are getting punished for speaking out against it. A lot of the mainstream media has policies to not report on it from the angle of Gaza. They're all about, what's happening to Israel and the October 7th attacks, of course, and they talk all about that and the horrors of that. But they do very little in the ways of actually humanizing the people in Gaza, of letting us know what's happening to the people in Gaza. And not just that, but accurately reporting that it is Israel that is inflicting these horrors on Gaza. But just like the States, there's a very cancel culture up here for people who are pro-Palestinian. And that needs to stop.
In terms of being able to criticize any side or speaking up for Palestinian rights in the face of what the ICJ has called plausible genocide, if I had the solutions to how to make that happen, I think it has to come from a full societal push towards justice, which involves not just media companies, but also politicians, also unions, keeping an eye on what is justice and how can we separate pressure groups from media and not allow any interference in the process of gathering information fairly and accurately on any side of any conflict. That has become a challenge right now on this particular issue. There is often a Palestinian exception to many free news gathering practices.
Yep, the Palestinian exception. It is a problem. And that's also part of the reason why my videos don't do well in the algorithms necessarily, is because it's not just mainstream media, it's social media that also tries to hide the extent of the horrors that is happening in Gaza. They are very biased in their coverage of Israel. And this is why I always say we need more cross-border solidarity between Canada and the United States, is because one can't do it without the other. Nothing would change. So if Canada suddenly started to really speak up and really kind of, stop sending weapons to Israel, stop sending money to Israel's actually directly calling Israel to do a ceasefire, nothing's going to change unless the United States does it as well. And the United States, in all fairness, has the power to do that without the assistance of Canada. However, it's not necessarily going to completely solve the problem without Canada, because if Americans stop selling weapons to Israel and Canada doesn't, it just means Canada gets more business. I wanted to share this article that I came across. The Breach is a good magazine, online magazine for progressive Canadian content and news reporting. And Stephen Harper's firm pours $350 million into developing military tech for Israel. Canadian money helped develop high-tech tools like behavior recognition, then used in Israel. So Stephen Harper here is the former Prime Minister of Canada, and he was Prime Minister. I was plugged into politics, but not nearly as much as I should have been, to know how much he damaged this country when he was in power. He hurt this country. And I was aware of some of it, but it wasn't until I got more involved in politics that I started to understand a lot of the extent of it. And not surprising, he is supporting of Israel in military stuff. I'm not going to read the whole article as it's quite long, but what I will try to remember to do, and I always say this, I might need people reminding me, is I will try to link it in the description box after I'm done this stream for people who want to read the full article, and I suggest that people do. Now, let's see if I can make this a bit bigger. I made that a lot bigger. What is that? I'm at 200% here, just to make that readable for the audience. So 11 days after Hamas attacked Israel on October, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper's current business partner, Yaron, wrote an op-ed about how their company would help the country stop these evil terrorists in their tracks. Their venture capital fund, AWZ Ventures, I don't know how to say these things, was well positioned. For years, the company has poured investments totaling at least $350 million into high-tech companies that support the Israeli security industry. Harper is the leading partner at the firm and president of its advisory committee. The former prime minister, who was a hardline supporter of Israel while in office, has promoted the company in Israeli media outlets and has said that the ventures is a chance to continue what I did in government. In 2021, the ventures launched a startup accelerator in Tel Aviv that partners with Israeli Ministry of Defense Research and Development wings and other Israeli agencies, including intelligence agency Mossad, security agency Shin Bet, and the Israel Defense Forces IDF elite cyber intelligence units. That partnership has never before been reported in the Canadian media. That partnership has never before been reported in the Canadian media. I wonder why. Maybe because it's former prime minister. Maybe because it would make, that former prime minister look bad. Maybe it's because he shouldn't be doing that. And this is what a lot of Canadians don't know behind the scenes when it comes to current politicians, former politicians, is just how invested that they get with all of these other corporations that kind of continue their goals, what they wanted to do. Our politicians are just as bought off as any politician in the United States. When they leave their jobs, if they've done their job well as a politician, they get into very cushy corporate jobs that, leads them to be millionaires. Most of the politicians in this country are in the 1%. It is very, very difficult to get a seat in office if you're not in the 1%, and basically impossible if you live with poverty, which means that aspect of Canadian society is never really represented in Ottawa, in our government. It's never being addressed from a person who actually lives with the reality of what it means to be living with poverty in this country. And things need to happen to make it so that it's easier for people to run to get a seat in this country. But just interesting that, this partnership between the former Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, and this company has never actually been reported before. The breach can also reveal new details about 3 companies funded by that venture that are helping Israel's post-October 7th actions, as well as 6 more that have done business with Israeli governments in recent years. My involvement in business is to look for profitable opportunities, but we're doing this in the context of promoting the same values that I had when I was Prime Minister, Harper said about the fund in 2019. We're not interested in values of surveillance states. But companies the fund is invested in produce a range of sophisticated spy tools and other cutting-edge technologies like facial and behavioral recognition software. One of the companies sell an artificial intelligence program used in a dozen Israeli municipalities that deploys surveillance footage to identify people gathering, throwing stones, or wearing hoodies. That sounds very anti-free speech, anti-protest. Sounds like it's a way to try to make sure that people don't express any displeasure with the government in power. And Harper probably wishes he had more power to make sure that protests never happened while he was in power. He's not for freedoms like most conservatives. He was never about Canadian people having freedoms. Well, a founder and managing partner of the venture says these technologies help the righteous side of the world. Critics say they allow investors to profit off Israel's repression of Palestinians and its illegal occupation of Palestinian lands. The author of The Palestinian Laboratory, How Israel Exports the Technology of Occupation Around the World, has documented how such companies in Israel are at the forefront of testing new weapons and then exporting them around the world. Canadians should be outraged, said Simon Black, an organizer with the Labour Against Arms Trade. Canadian capital is complicit in Israeli apartheid and occupation. So, like I said, I'm not going to read this whole article. It is fairly lengthy. I do suggest that people go out, read The Breach. The Breach has lots of wonderful reporting. But also, it's good to know just exactly what our politicians are up to in their spare time. After they've left office, the things that they do. And how can you look at that and not think while they were in office that they weren't being influenced by this, that they weren't being influenced by the fact that they could have these cushy jobs after they left if they played ball with these corporations? Harper, everyone working with me worked with me for years in the government in one way or another, says this part of the thing here, which, yeah, it makes sense. As Prime Minister between 2006 and 2015, Harper sought closer relations with Israel, becoming one of Israel's most stalwart supporters. Under Harper's leadership, Canada stopped voting in favor of UN resolutions that condemned Israel's illegal settlements and other practices and cut off aid to the Palestinian Authority when Palestinians elected Hamas in democratic elections in 2006. In 2013, he described Israel as a light of freedom and democracy in what is otherwise a region of darkness. Wow, that is not accurate. On a trip in 2014, Harper became the first Canadian Prime Minister to address the Knesset and was given a key to the Israeli parliament. He was welcomed enthusiastically by Israel's right-wing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who threw a welcome ceremony and dined with Harper 3 nights in a row. After leaving office, he has kept up relations, making a video for conservative online content generator PragerU praising Israel. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, facial recognition in the hands of every soldiers. Let's read a tidbit of this. While identifying wounded people in hospitals is a benevolent use of facial and voice recognition technology, human rights groups have raised the alarm about Israel's other uses for these programs. A May 2023 report by Amnesty International titled Automated Apartheid, How Facial Recognition Fragments Segregates and Controls Palestinians in the Occupied Palestinian Territories focused on Israel's use of facial recognition technology. Israel is using these tools to entrench their system of oppression and domination over Palestinians, the report says. The country used the technology has expanded in recent years with citywide networks of camera in East Jerusalem and elsewhere. Amnesty International documented that young Palestinian activists have said Israel soldiers at checkpoints scan their faces with the phone camera and suddenly their behavior towards us changes because they see all the information. It's in the hands of every soldier in the mobile phones. The report says Amnesty could not state with certainty which companies provided the technology to Israel. That's a horrifying thought. Having soldiers be able to look at your history in an instant because they just scan your face with their phone to see, oh, this is one of the troublemakers, this one went out to a protest, this one was on social media being outspoken, so maybe we're not going to let them through the checkpoint. Maybe we're going to be a little bit more cruel to them. Maybe we're going to search their stuff. Maybe we're just going to find something in their vehicle that shouldn't be there and arrest them again so that they can no longer make trouble. Surveillance state, not exactly an ideal place to live in any country. And we do have that problem here in Canada too. If you take your cell phone to protests and rallies, that stuff gets tracked later on. And it really does restrict people's freedom of expression. This idea that, yeah, sure, you're allowed to go out and protest and speak your mind, but if you do, we're going to keep an eye on you and hound you for the rest of your life. It's kind of a disincentive to get involved. Anyway, let's check the Sandbox. Demand Better World says the NDP has no leverage because if there was another election, the cons would sweep to power. Yeah, it is an issue that the Liberals are allowed to get away with whatever they want at this point because they know if the NDP decides to not prop them up, then there's going to be an election. And yes, the Conservatives would get into power right now. It is, and then Demand Better says the NDP and Greens need to cooperate if they ever want to overthrow the LibCon duopoly. I think the NDP could do it, but they need an overhaul. An absolute overhaul. Get rid of a lot of the people who are in the establishment within the NDP. There needs to be a leadership review. We need to have actual people within that party running that party. But I know from personal experience, they have, overrode the desires and the will of the riding associations. The associations wanted certain candidates in the elections, but then the head office of the NDP sweeps in and says, no, this person is going to be a candidate instead. And there's no vote on it. There's no real democracy when it comes to choosing who's going to be the candidate in any particular riding necessarily. And, the party really needs to be taken over again by the people. And I think if we could do that and really get people motivated, then the NDP would stand a chance of actually getting into power, because this country is craving a populist. They so much want somebody to be outspoken, to go out there, and that's part of the reason why Pierre Poilievre is so high in approval. Why so many people like him, because he is a populist. He is speaking to the people. He's lying to them, no doubt about it. He's not going to follow through with any of the good things and do all of the bad thing he says, plus then some he didn't even said he was going to do. A conservative in power at the same time, a potential Trump presidency again, is just nightmare scenario. Absolute nightmare scenario. Oh. Shade Dragon, I read today that IDF soldiers are looting Gaza, which is also a war crime. Yes, I've seen lots of the images of Israel's soldiers saying, oh, I have this new bike now I can send home to my neighbor's kid. Or they're going through underwear drawers of the women who have fled and showing off the underwear, finding any valuables, taking them, destroying things. They're making it so that there's nothing for them to go back to. And we've seen pictures of just how ash-covered and hollow all the land is up there now. All the buildings have been blown up and it's just rubble everywhere. And then even after that, they go through the rubble and they take anything of value. Because they said, oh yeah, this is, we just need everyone to move from northern Gaza temporarily. And we knew it was a lie at the time. And they've just shown their true colors since. Because there's literally nothing for people to go back to. The infrastructure, their schools, their hospitals, their farms, their businesses, their homes are all gone. Kelly Bach, RIP, Aaron Bushnell. I was debating if I was going to cover that story or not. It's a bit heavy story, and all the leftist media I've seen have covered it as well. And I'm not entirely sure if there's anything I could constructively add to that conversation. But I'll think about it. Like I said, I wasn't really planning on doing a show today. So the things that I am going to be focusing on for the next bit will actually be inspired because of the calls into the majority report. Shade Dragon, Biden may lose if he doesn't call for a ceasefire. It'll be horrible all around either way. Yeah, he needs to do, because those who are paying attention to the American politics right now know it was, 10% of the vote and whatever Democratic thingy that you guys have down there was for uncommitted, to kind of let Biden know that they're not happy with him. Who's to say he's going to listen? MIDI doctors, it's crazy. Israel reported back to the court yesterday. South Africa got a copy. They've done nothing that the ruling, the ICJ, has asked them to do, like making sure that humanitarian aid actually gets to the people in Gaza. No, I just wish that there was a easier, better, more effective way of holding these nations accountable for the atrocities that they're committing. But, if it was easy to hold nations accountable for the atrocities that they commit, then Canada and the United States and a lot of other Western countries would be in a lot of trouble. Okay. Looney Tunes 9000. If you haven't heard, Sandy was given a shout out on the Majority Report. Speaking of which, if you haven't already, why not subscribe to the Majority Report or download it as a podcast? Yes, everyone knows I am a Majority Report fan. Ah, there we go. Majority Report fan. I was inspired to start my channel from Michael Brooks, and my ultimate dream with my channel would be to make exactly what people who were calling into the show this week said. And that is kind of a version of the Majority Report here in Canada. A Canadian version of the Majority Report. The Maple Report. I don't know what it would be called. Probably not the Maple Report. I don't know. I think we overdo the maple trope a little bit too much, but who knows? The problem is that I can't do it by myself, and I am horrible at networking. Because I tried to cover so many issues in Canada, but a lot of them require me to actually do research and reading into, because like many Canadians, I don't necessarily know a lot of the ins and outs of what's happening. And so as I'm relaying this information, I'm often learning about it myself. And it is just me. I have to find the articles, find the videos, put it together, lay it out, do all the graphics, do all the advertising, do all the posting, do the shooting, do the editing. Like, it's all on me. And if I had help with this, then it'd be a lot easier. But, ideally, I would love to have, a time where I could do almost a daily show where the first half I'm interviewing a Canadian, like some sort of professional in Canadian, a journalist, a doctor, a specialist in something, um, about Canadian issues. And then in the second fun half, do more Canadian stories, but also, still cover the social issues that have cross-border appeal, because not all the stories I do are strictly Canadian or Canadian related, but a lot of the queer stories I cover are from the United States. That's because it's happening, queer hate is happening on both sides of the border. It's an issue on both sides. So mentioning it and talking about what's happening down there, I can also relate being part of that community. So, some social issues I'll talk about that isn't necessarily Canadian centric, but I try to always add the Canadian bend to it, because there's not enough simply just reporting on Canada up here. And part of it is the market isn't huge, but I think as the right wing is increasing and becoming more powerful up here, there's a larger desire for a leftist media to push back on it. And you have the Rational National, but he's been very open in the fact that he prefers American politics. He started his channel with that. He does cover some Canadian stories. They never do nearly as well as his American ones, because the vast majority of his audience are American. The Serfs, they also do Canadian stories from time to time, but that isn't necessarily their primary focus either. So on my channel, it is the primary focus. Ah. Rachel Atwood, it sucks so much that you never got to meet Michael J. Brooks. I really, really wish I had a chance to connect with him. Also saying Lance and Dole would surely offer some guidance as they're able. Uh, yes and no. David, I don't think is that keen to be a mentor. I think he's busy with his own life right now. Like, he has a new kid and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's just a matter of time like available time that Lance and David have. They have their hands full already. So, I've tried reaching out to them occasionally. I can try a little bit harder. I at least am on the surf's radar. Lance does know who I am. So that's a good start. I'm a moderator on their YouTube channel. And when I say hi in chat, he'll shout me out. So he does know who I am. But it's just a matter of like how much time they have, how many resources they have, because they're probably stretched thin themselves. Brenda Knoll, how can we help? Just help get my name out there. When you're watching other leftist programs, mention me. See if other leftist programs would be willing to have me on to talk, to get my channel a little bit more attention. Like even just that shout out today on the Majority Report got me a little bit of subscribers. And every little bit helps. And so, yeah, just if you watch your other leftist shows, let them know about me and take it from there. But yeah, in order to have like an actual show like the Majority Report, I'd need like an editor, a producer, like all of that sort of stuff so that I could just focus on the presentation part of it or something. Oh, okay. Let's see. So before we get into the Majority Report stuff, I just wanted to touch on this. Let's go here. So Jacob tweeted out New York Governor Hochul, I think that's how you say her name, last night on local opposition to Israel's war in Gaza. If Canada someday ever attacked Buffalo, I'm sorry, my friends, there would be no Canada the next day. That's a natural reaction. You have a right to defend yourself and to make sure it never happens again. Yes, my reaction to being wronged in any way whatsoever is genocide. That seems natural reaction to me. Yes, if somebody were to break into my house and attack me, my immediate reaction is to wipe out their entire family. That's only normal, isn't it? In fact, why don't we just wipe out their entire neighborhood? Because, the neighborhood helped make that person evil in the first place. Absolutely ridiculous. And there's some interesting, comparisons in here and how she's painting Canada in here, but also it's a very tired trope of American politicians or American media people using Canada as the example of if Canada were to attack, or, maybe we should invade Canada. Fox News was all over it at one point. It's been talked about before over and over again that maybe the United States should invade Canada or that somehow Canada will attack the United States. Neither are going to happen. Neither needs to happen. Partly because it would destroy the economy. Our economies are too intertwined to, if you were to do that, it would just totally disrupt the economy. And the people in power like a stronger economy, and they don't necessarily want to tamper with that. But we're already so interconnected between our economy, our trade, our politicians, all of that. It's already so interconnected. There's no need. Like none. The influence America has over Canada, it's pretty strong. The influence some Canadian aspects have over America, not as strong, but it's there. Yeah, it is just, it's them just showing how violent that they want to be and using the innocent little Canadians as their example. It's like, yeah, just to show how strong we are, we would wipe out those innocent little Canadians at the slightest provocation. So, just really ridiculous. But let's hear it from her herself.
Call out Hamas for what it is, and it is a terrorist organization that must be stopped. No one, no country should live with that threat, that specter over them. And for those who don't understand this dynamic here in our own state, in our own country, I'll give you an example. I'm from Buffalo. Anybody realize that? If Canada someday ever attacked Buffalo, I'm sorry, my friends, there would be no Canada the next day, right? Right?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't like the idea of that, of being connected to some terrorist group that has attacked Buffalo. And that's kind of what they're saying, is that Canada is Hamas and that everyone in Canada would be terrorists if that were if any aspect of Canada were to attack Buffalo, then that just means the entire country is behind it.
I love Canada, but we did have the War of 1812 and they did burn Buffalo, so there might be a little conflict here.
Technically, we weren't really Canada at that point. It depends on how people like to say history. When Canadians like to say, yeah, we stuck it to you Americans one time, then it's like Canada did it, but technically we weren't really Canada at that point. We hadn't signed the British North American Agreement yet.
But think about that. That is a natural reaction. You have a right to defend yourself and to make sure it never happens again. And that is Israel's right. Call out Hamas for what it is.
Yes, it's a natural reaction to want to commit genocide if you've been slighted by another group. Oh, that's exactly what colonial settlers like to think anyway. But I came across this article from Jacobin that actually also kind of talks about this. So, why are so many Democrats ready to nuke Canada? And I'm like, oh, that's a Democrat that said that? Usually it's Republicans that are saying that they need to, bomb Canada in one way or another. But it is just kind of weird that a Democrat would also be on board with, destroying Canada. New York Governor Kathy Hochul recently invoked U.S. annihilation of Canada as analogy for Israel's brutal war on Gaza. Her comments may have been outlandish, but they exemplify Democratic Party leaders' use of absurd justifications for slaughter. So, let's see. So there would be no Canada. And afterwards, she was forced to apologize, expressing regret that she used an inappropriate analogy that I now realize could be hurtful to members of our community, though she did not specify which community she was referring to. She also said she regretted her poor choice of words, but did not directly apologize to Palestinian community of New York State, nor to anyone in Canada for suggesting that the complete annihilation of a people is a natural reaction to a terrorist attack. So her poorly chosen words are remarkably similar to those made over 40 years ago by Senator Joe Biden. Sorry, over 40 years ago, he was a senator. And he's running for president now. Sometimes it's hard to grasp that, that in, I guess, 1982, over 40 years ago, he was an adult, like an older, middle-aged adult. And he's running for president now. Yeah, I'm not an ageist, but come on. At some point, and he's not in the greatest health, he's not in the greatest cognitive ability. Again, I just don't understand how in the United States the president is supposed to represent the best of what America has to offer. And on the Democratic side, you have Joe Biden. On the Republican side, you have Donald Trump. Wow. Anyway, So, as reported by Ben Burgess and Jacobin during a 1982 meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister, I don't know names. Biden reportedly said, if attacks were launched from Canada into the United States, everyone here would have said, attack all the cities of Canada. And we don't care if all the civilians get killed. So apparently, Joe Biden is all about that genocide. He'd be fine genociding Canadians as well. Huh. This episode indicates a concerning pattern among Democratic Party leaders advocating for disproportionate retaliation and lack of concern for civilian casualties, as well as surprising cavalier attitude towards potential collateral damage in dear old Canada, staunch ally of the United States. It also speaks to an unfortunate consistency among Israeli leaders to disregard their own intelligence in pursuit of genocidal campaigns against Palestinians. At the time of the meeting with Biden in 1982, Israel had invaded and occupied southern Lebanon ostentatiously in retribution for an assassination attempt against. Yeah, okay. So, like, it's always interesting that they use Canada as the example, because we're very expendable to Americans, apparently. But would that be the same if, let's say, Israel were to launch a terrorist attack into the United States? What if Israel did that? Would the Americans say, okay, so we now need to wipe out all of Israel? Or is it suddenly different? You know, when you switch the countries. Like, of course, I don't think they'd have a problem saying that about Mexico. Would they say that about England? If the Brits were to launch a terrorist attack in America, would America be like, yeah, now we're just going to firebomb the entire island? Like, what does that say about what Americans really think about Canadians? If they're so easy about the fact, like, no, we would just genocide them. They're not worth anything. Let's see. I think there was a part in here that I wanted to get to, or was that it? I think that might have been it. Or no. Oh, no, this is the part of the article I also wanted to get to. Okay. The key takeaway from the War of 1812, particularly in context of current conflicts in the Middle East, should be that the United States largely abandoned its ambitions to invade and occupy Canada by the mid-20th century, and that the two nations have since resolved their differences diplomatically. Sworn enemies can become best of friends if the use of force is taken off the table. The reluctance of prominent Democratic Party figures to embrace this lesson suggests a troubling aspect of American foreign policy. However much Huckel wishes to walk back her poorly worded statements, there is an undeniable pattern, both in rhetoric as much as action, of total annihilation as an acceptable policy either for the United States or for some of its allies. This is the case clear enough from American conduct post 9/11, in which the United States, too, disregarded the expert opinion of its own intelligence community in blind pursuit of revenge. Yeah, this idea that Israel thinks that it needs to destroy all of Hamas by basically wiping out all of Palestinians in order to have peace is false. Like, it is outright false. The idea that they can't have a ceasefire or else, they'll never have real peace. And, one would hope that we live in a world where nations can grow and mature and develop and become better for its people and the people around the world. We've had plenty of nations in the past change for the better. We've also had plenty of nations change for the worse. And when you have support of other nations to help build you back up, to help you get on your feet after something devastating has happened, then you have a better chance of changing for the better as opposed to the worse. Main jolt. Oh. I try to add in my commentary as best I can, but sometimes I get tripped up over my words. My sentences can be jumbled in my head at times. But let's check the Sandbox. Tea flowers, it's a race thing. They use Canada as an example so it doesn't appear that they hate brown people. Or it's just their willingness to kill anyone. Yeah, that probably has something to do with it. But you know, they should just change it and say, you know what, if Israel were to launch an attack on America, then America would just wipe out Israel and see how well that flies. Or, you know, if Canadians were to be sitting around here and having all of our leaders just musing about the idea of like, oh, if the Americans ever, you know, step foot over the border in an aggressive way, we would just destroy them and see how well Americans take it. Even though in our case, it would actually be a joke because we understand, okay, the dynamics here. We understand that America has about 10 times the population and a military that, yeah, could squash ours. Like, we don't live in a delusion here. It's good to be good neighbors to the United States when they do have the power to literally just come in and sweep over this country in a matter of days. Hmm. Uh, Looney Tunes 9000 replying to Kelly that Trump has now pay up to a full $454 million for the fraud. He can, however, apply for a loan during his appeal, and the presidential immunity in election interference case will be in SCOTUS. Yes, I've heard. I reported on the initial settlement, and there were penalties and interest and all that sort of stuff. So almost $500 million. Actually, if you convert that to Canadian currency, it would be $500 million Canadian. Oh. Anyway. Let's see. So, this week, twice this week, somebody was able to get through the phone lines of the Majority Report to be like, hey, you know, Canada, it's really horrible up here. We need somebody to say something about it. And both times I'm sitting there in chat and looking at it, and it's like, I'm right here. I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing. I'm doing the thing that you people are asking for. I'm covering the Canadian issues. And the first one was about the international student crisis and what's happening there. And I have touched on that before. Haven't gone into detail, but I have touched on it. And yeah, it gets super frustrating that there's so much crossover between my audience and the Majority Report audience, and yet there's still so many people who don't know I exist. Anyway, I did get a shout out today, so that was kind of cool. So maybe for this part, I have to put the toque back on. So, there we go. I'm trying to mirror image this there. But yeah, I think for this part I need the toque on while I'm talking about the Majority Report. I think I look good in the toque. If I can actually get this set straight. There we go. There we go. Majority report. Took. Okay, yes. So, twice this week, somebody's called in the majority report. Now, I wasn't planning on necessarily doing a show today, but then there was the call, and then there was a shout out today. So then I thought, okay, I'm going to do a show today because there was something else I wanted to get to, but I will get to that eventually. But why don't we actually listen to what these callers had to say?
No, I don't want to get into it.
Calling from a 226 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, is that me?
Yep.
Oh, hi. This is Dan calling from Windsor, Ontario.
Dan from Windsor, Ontario. What's on your mind?
Been a big fan. Just wanted to say, I've been listening to you
I know where Windsor is. I've been in Windsor. That's the thing. I know Windsor.
guys for years. You guys actually helped pull me out of. I was kind of briefly going towards the Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder end of the spectrum, probably about 6-7 years ago, and it was actually Michael's debate with Sargon of Akkad that really pulled me back from that.
Wow. That's going way back. That was one of his first debates I think he ever did, actually.
Yeah, but it was him talking about, you know, the activists in the Middle East and everything that really broadened my horizons and helped open me up and open up my experiences. Anyways, what I wanted to say, sorry, a little nervous actually. I'm from Canada, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of coverage. Canada's falling apart right now.
Absolutely, it is. No arguments there.
I haven't seen really any coverage in leftist media, and I'm even talking about leftist YouTubers like David Dole from the Rational National and Lance from the Surfs. They haven't been talking about the international student crisis that's been happening in Canada. We have been importing almost 1 million people every single year, mostly from India. These poor kids are being exploited like you wouldn't believe and crammed, sometimes 20 people into a 2-bedroom basement apartment, all throughout Toronto and any major city in Canada. On my block alone, Windsor, which is borders Detroit. On my block alone, there are 2 separate houses filled with international Indian students. Now, I am all for kids coming over here to study and learn and even get permanent residency and live here and work here and to grow a family here. But we have not accommodated these people through infrastructure or anything, or services. Our services are basically at a breaking point right now, and there is no talk about expanding them. The Conservatives in Canada have used this as a wedge issue to try to discredit Trudeau and get him out of power.
Very true as well. There's a lot that I want to say about this, but I'm just trying to, play through most of the call before I start getting into some of the ins and outs of this story.
I think Trudeau is personally going to lose the next election by a landslide. I think we're going to have
I unfortunately think the same thing.
Conservative majority federally in Canada. We have our CBC, there's a documentary on the National that was hour-long documentary talking about the student crisis here in Canada and how many suicides these kids are doing, are going through. Their families are sometimes selling farm equipment and everything to send these kids here, and they're being gobbled up by diploma mills with worthless degrees.
Oy.
It is tragic, and I'm shocked that I have not seen more coverage of it. Even in Canada, there isn't enough.
Is there any
coverage
type of reporting that's going on?
There's very little. I will send.
The thing about reporting in Canada is there is actual reporting on what's happening with international students. The problem is that you have to know that issue exists and then seek out the information. Because a lot of stories that we think aren't being covered are actually being covered, but these stories don't get out to the masses. Like, it's I've noticed this when I've done research for stories and I'm thinking, oh, I want to know about blank, but I've never seen any coverage on it. But then as soon as I Google it, I do see that there's news articles on that particular issue. So it's not that it's not being covered, it's that it's not reaching people. The media or outlets, the news outlets, they aren't making it a priority, certain stories. And so they just kind of post it and leave it, and they don't promote it at all. It doesn't become part of the discourse. It doesn't become part of what Canadians are talking about around the water cooler, because we don't have a leftist media like the Majority Report that highlights some of these stories that have a larger impact on people's everyday lives. So instead, we hear about all these other mainstream media news stories, and it's almost like they're choosing what we get to see, what they think we need to know. We're not getting the news we need to know. We're getting the news the media wants us to know. And it's a struggle getting out there. But I do have some videos and articles about the issue of international students. So we will get to that in when this call is done.
And you guys, the documentary, it's a YouTube documentary from CBC The National about the international students being exploited, but they're all being brought in. The capitalist class and so one of our colleges, Conestoga College in London, Ontario, has increased enrollment over the last 10 years by 1,400%. It is absurd and it is completely unsustainable. And these poor kids are the ones
private?
Are
these private colleges? Is that it?
Yes, they are. Yeah,
Combination private public. We'll get into that.
they are.
Yeah.
It is and our housing prices are like horrific. I have two kids who are just out of high school now, and like their prospects of ever moving out are like non-existent right now.
Yeah. Send us that information.
Yeah, I think that it is something that needs more attention, because these kids, it's like a silent. It's not like it almost feels to me like indentured servitude. Because they're afraid
sort of like
to make any noise.
It's a trafficking thing in many respects too, I think.
Absolutely, it is. It is heartbreaking, and I'm seeing it everywhere. And I think that you guys maybe should be aware of it, and other leftist media figures should be aware of it.
I'm aware of it. Hi. I'm a leftist media figure. I'm aware of it.
Because, like, honestly, it's not being covered.
Appreciate
anywhere
the call.
near as much as it should be. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Colin from a 3.
Yes. So a little bit more about this. So the caller said private colleges. And that is a problem, but it's not the problem. It's a combination of public and private colleges, primarily here in Ontario. And both the public and the private they have their own separate issues. And we'll get into them. But in the end, what it means is that a lot of vulnerable people, mostly from India, are being exploited. And the trouble is that as soon as you say something like, oh, we need to limit immigration, we need to limit international students, the liberals, the Justin Trudeau liberals, will automatically accuse you of being racist. When, we have a housing crisis, we have a food crisis, we have affordability crisis. Maybe we shouldn't be letting in as many people as we do, but also the people that we are letting in through international students, they are being horrendously abused and exploited. And it's not okay. They deserve better treatment. And one of the things that this government can do is actually, start limiting the amount of international students that come here. And we'll get into both. Again, it's a private and public education issue. It's not just private. Let's go here.
More than 2,000 international students from over 60 countries worldwide.
That was 2017. Now, that number has more than tripled at this public college in southwestern Ontario. One of them is Shabnoor Abdulatif, who's just 2 months away from completing her postgraduate certificate in healthcare administration management. At 34, she came to Canada to start a new life, giving up her career as a certified physician in Iran.
Since I'm a vocal person, it was not a safe place for me.
Abdulatif is aware of the scrutiny being placed on her and her fellow international students.
I also feel that there's a lot of us here, and without housing, without healthcare, I can totally understand that. But is it all on us?
No one should be blaming the students, of course. I mean, clear as day.
So something that a lot of people don't take into account, because Canadians like to take our universal health care for granted. International students don't get that. They have to get other forms of health insurance when they're here, and that health insurance can vary. So that's another expense that is put on the people traveling here for an education.
By the data, the issue is the schools themselves that are bringing them in.
That data, obtained and analyzed by CBC News, shows that what has been framed as a national crisis is in fact driven by a handful of colleges and universities. Out of the 10 with the greatest increases in study permits, 9 of them are public schools in Ontario. It's not double or triple. We're talking 30 times more students. This student advocate calls increases like these reckless.
They knew there was already a housing shortage problem. And that's how public colleges in Ontario responded, by trying to get as many as they could through the door before the door got slammed.
We show Abdulatif how much permits have increased in those handful of Ontario schools.
And Algoma is 40 times more.
Wow. Are they even prepared for this much students?
It feels like schools are not there to help us, but to get our money.
We reached out to the top 10 schools with the highest increases. 7 replied. One school explained it doesn't control the number of study permits approved. That's on Ottawa. Almost all mentioned decreases in provincial funding and domestic enrollment.
So Valerie, how did the federal government react to your analysis of their data?
Well, Immigration Minister Mark Miller said that he doesn't feel he misrepresented the situation by focusing on private schools, but that there is responsibility shared across the board, specifically for public school, private schools that have these alarming increases. He says, moving on, what's needed is for provinces, and specifically for Ontario, to assume responsibility. And he says, regarding these bad actors, if provinces don't move to shut them down, Ottawa will. We reached out to the Ford government for a comment on this. They did not reply.
They did not. All right, Valerie Willette, thank you.
Thank you.
What a lot of Canadians also don't know is a lot of our public services, healthcare, education, like things that are publicly funded, are privately run. So these colleges and universities are still looking to make a profit. That is their primary goal, not to educate people per se, but to get a profit. And I've had a personal experience with one of these colleges, Conestoga, in one of their money grab schemes. A while ago, there was a push to get unemployed Canadians up-to-date skills with this program called Second Career. And it was a chance for adults to go back to school to get an education at no cost, other than like books and taxes and things of that sort. And I partook in this program, and the program I selected was called Web Design and Development, because I very much would like to go back to school and actually get a diploma, because I don't have a college degree or diploma or a university degree or diploma. I don't have that. And that has been one of the biggest reasons why I can't get a job, is because of that. I've been to college. I probably have the equivalent of a diploma, but since I don't have that official document, I don't get through the door of many corporations or companies. And so I enrolled in this program called Web Design and Development, and it was supposed to be an accelerated course. And so in the course of this 1 year, it was supposed to be like the equivalent of a 3-year program in programming and web development. Well, it turned out to be this much web development, which is what I was primarily interested in, and this much programming, which I was not necessarily interested in. And I hate being a certain level of smart when after just the first little bit, few weeks, I knew this program wasn't going to do what it had promised it would do. And to give you an idea of how much I wanted this, how much I wanted to get that education and how determined and committed I was, that program I enrolled in had units, and you had to pass every unit in order to progress and go forward. The first day that program started was the day I had surgery, a pretty drastic surgery, gastric bypass. I had surgery. The first day that program started. I was let out of the hospital on Wednesday. So I had the surgery Monday, was let out of the hospital Wednesday. I had my ass in that classroom on Thursday. Yeah, I got into class the soonest available time I could, when really I probably should have been at home resting. But I very, very much wanted to do this program, to get that education so that I could have a better chance at a job. But it didn't take me long to realize I wasn't going to get what I was promised. Now, fortunately, I didn't have to pay for this program because, like I said, it was covered under the second career thing. But there were a few people in that class that paid out of pocket for it. And they paid roughly $12,000 for this 1-year program, which to you Americans probably doesn't sound that high. To Canadians, that's pretty damn high for a 1-year program. For a program that in the end was nothing, because I have friends who are in IT programming, things of that sort. And when I was showing them the curriculum and the things that I was covering, they said, well, this program, all it is a surveyor course. You go into it to see if programming is right for you, to see if it's something that you would like. And then after you've taken this course, what you then do is go to university or college specifically for programming. That this course itself was never going to get me a job. And there was an incentive behind the college to have these programs and to have people pass these programs, because that meant the college would get more money. And so because we were being crammed with information at such a rate, every time there was a test, so much information had to be put forth that for the first time ever, when I sat down to do one of these tests, I completely blanked. Had no idea what to write. And it was an open book test. And I sat there without a clue as to what to do. I passed. I still passed. Fortunately, about halfway through that program, I was offered a job that became my kind of stable job for the next while, that helped me kind of get back on my feet and out of debt and all that sort of stuff. But this program, like many of the other programs that colleges started during the second career, was nothing but a money grab. That's all they were doing. And that's what they're doing right now with international students. It's a money grab. They're getting as many in as they can in the window that they have to make money. And there's a lot more strain on it too, because there's been a lot of funding cuts to education in this province, thanks to Doug Ford. So You know, they bring these students over here with the promises of all this education, that you're going to get a diploma, that you're going to get these great jobs. But then there's a good chance that they're going to end up in programs like the program that I ended up in, which is worthless. Absolutely worthless. That said, Conestoga and the other colleges do offer good programs as well. So it's hard to tell which is which when you don't know going in. But there are some really good programs you can take. Unfortunately, with the second career, the programs were designed specifically for that. I couldn't just choose anything. It had to be a second career geared course. So that's part of the problem there. And so now we have tons and tons of international students being exploited the same way. I can't say I was exploited, but that program was exploited just to get money. And there is more.
Well, Premier Doug Ford has been vocally opposed to the idea of increasing tuition during an affordability crisis. But new internal government documents obtained by Global News seem to suggest the Premier overruled his own cabinet. There was an internal push to raise tuition by a modest amount over 3 years, but the Premier shut those efforts down.
Keep in mind, Doug Ford wants to see the education, much like the health system, fail. The increase was probably necessary due to the cutbacks the Ford government has done to education. But he doesn't want education to succeed, just like he doesn't want healthcare to succeed in this province, because he wants it all completely privatized.
When the Ford government first received a report on how to stabilize...
All that is to say that it wasn't an altruistic reason why Doug Ford didn't want to increase tuition. It was, you know, to help make sure the schools fail.
Ontario's colleges and universities. A key recommendation was to increase tuition.
Modest increases in tuition while protecting low and moderate students. It would have been a responsible way to provide additional money.
But when the Ford government ultimately unveiled its suite of measures, the tuition increase was left out, as the government insists now is not the right time.
We will continue to make tuition affordable for every student in this province.
But behind the scenes, there was a political battle. Documents obtained by Global News show that the Ministry of Colleges and Universities was prepared to increase tuition for Ontario students by 5% over 3 years, costing students hundreds in yearly increases, but bringing in hundreds of millions for institutions. The minister, sources said, tapped other cabinet ministers to convince the Premier, who stood firmly against. Then, at a news conference, the Premier publicly stated he wasn't going to increase rates. The comments at the podium made it official and quashed the debate internally. While even critics at Queen's Park agree with the government's freeze, universities say they are now dependent solely on the government for funding.
It would have been an option to increase international students, so that is not on the table. The tuition is now off the table. So really what we have is the government providing the operating funding. So we'll have to go back to government.
Meanwhile, the federal government is firing back at the province's claims that they were not consulted on the changes.
That's complete garbage. They should have known it. They've had Auditor General reports. I've spoken quite publicly about it.
Critics claim it's the Ford government's own actions that created the crisis in the sector.
Jurisdiction. Over and over and over again in this country. It's jurisdiction, jurisdiction. That's why nothing can get done. It's just a very convenient way for the federal government, the Liberals, to blame the Conservatives for not doing anything, and the Conservatives to blame the Liberals for not doing anything. I have a little bit on that we'll get to just after this, to kind of paint the picture of how ridiculous it is.
When it comes to tuition, the Ford government did choose to increase tuition on out-of-province Canadian students, meaning...
Oh, really? So those international students will see even higher rates to come over here.
Post-secondary institutions will still be able to bring in millions of dollars from those students, but not the ones from Ontario. They say it won't be enough to cover the massive funding gap. At Queen's Park, I'm Colin DeMello. Back to you.
Yes, You'll still be able to exploit those international students, but you won't be able to exploit Ontario students quite the same way. So here's a little bit more on the situation for international students. Feds tell provinces to fix international student rackets. The federal government is prepared to crack down on dubious post-secondary institutions that recruit international students if provinces aren't up to the task, Immigration Minister Mark Miller warned Friday. Miller made comments as he announced new rules to curb fraud and bad actors in the international student program following an investigation this summer into more than 100 cases involving fake admission letters. Provinces are responsible for accrediting schools that can accept international students, which include both public universities and colleges, as well as private institutions. In his final months in the role for Immigration Minister, Sean Fraser raised concerns about the number of private colleges and strip malls and other venues that rely on international student tuition, but in some cases offer a meager education in return. So we're talking about an empty unit in a strip mall being taken over for a semester by one of these universities for international students to come to and get an education. Blatant fraud. Like, it's just total exploitation. And there was the promises of, you're going to get all this education, this diploma, just to find out that they're getting basically nothing and no supports. And what you would normally get at a public college, the insurance that you could buy there, the supports that you would get there were non-existent in these private colleges. So they're two separate problems, but they're both exploiting the same group of people. Because you have recruiters that were going out to India and encouraging people to get all the family wealth together to send their one child that they could afford to get an education that would then better them and help out their entire family. And they would help, make sure that they could get there and all this sort of stuff with promises of, housing and healthcare and stuff. Just for the people to get here to find out that there was nothing. No real education, no supports, and at the end, they're not going to have anything that will actually help them get the careers they were promised. Several advocacy groups, including Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, have highlighted cases of students' exploitation by some of those institutions. Miller said Friday international school programs have created an ecosystem that is rife with perverse incentives and that is lucrative for the institutions and for provinces that have underfunded their post-secondary schools. Underfunded their post-secondary schools, yes. You see, if those post-secondary schools weren't so underfunded, they wouldn't be so desperate to exploit international students. They shouldn't do it anyway, but they are, after all, bottom line is profit. The federal government is coming forward and opening its arms to provincial partners, territorial partners, to make sure we all do our jobs properly, Miller said in a press conference at Sheraton College in Brampton. If that job can't be done, the federal government is prepared to do it. The Immigration Department counted 800,000 active student study permits at the end of 2020, a 170% increase over the last decade. What we are seeing is in the ecosystem is that one has been chasing after short-term gain without looking at long-term pain. And we need to reverse that trend, but it will take time, he said. Ontario in particular has challenges when it comes to the accreditation of post-secondary institutions, but it is not the only one. Miller did not elaborate on what those specific challenges are. The Ontario Ministry of Colleges and Universities did not answer specific questions, but said in a statement that the provincial government will again ask for a meeting with new federal minister to discuss and plan changes once they've been communicated with ministry. Now, the thing is that there are specific reasons that the government isn't sharing, because then it would kind of give the game away of what they're doing, of the fact that something could be done to fix the situation that they're not doing. So when it comes to this sort of stuff, it's like, yeah, we're just not going to be specific on these, because if we were specific, then then we might be held accountable by the media. Wouldn't want that. Saram Rowe, an organizer with the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, said the fly-by-night colleges are sometimes partnered with public institutions, but even those can be exploitive, she said. She said she is working with a group of students who paid tuition up front to one of those institutions, but were asked for more money just weeks before class enrollment began. The school said, well, if you don't have the money, you can go back home, earn some more, come back, Rose said Friday. She said the federal government must take up the accreditation of colleges and universities that accept international students. You see, here's where we get into a little bit of the problem with the jurisdiction, is when it comes to immigration and things of that sort. That's a federal issue, but education, colleges and universities, that is a provincial issue. Falls within the purview of provincial. So when you have a crossover like this, it can become a bit tricky as to who can do what and when and why and who gets paid and all that sort of stuff. So they are aware of the substandard nature of these institutions, these fly-by-night private colleges, she said. Also on Friday, Miller announced new rules in the federal government's jurisdiction to address fraud and bad actors in the international student program. Miller's department plans to set up a system to recognize post-secondary schools that have higher standards for services, supports, outcomes for international students in time for the next fall semester. The standards could include adequate access to housing, mental health services, and a lower ratio of international to Canadian students, Miller said, though the criteria hasn't been finalized. Let's see, how much more is this? So our goal here is to punish the bad actors to make sure that they're held accountable and reward the good actors who provide adequate outcomes for success international students, the minister said. Let's see. The department is also looking to combat fraud by verifying international students' acceptance letters from colleges and universities. The extra verification is a reaction to a scheme that dates back to 2017, which saw immigration agents issue fake acceptance letters to get international students into Canada. So imagine that. You get this acceptance letter, and you're so excited, and you come over here because, you know, you used all the family funds to get this education, just to get here and find out it doesn't even exist. This college that you're supposed to be going to, this program you're supposed to be taking, it doesn't even exist. Or you can start it, and a few weeks into it, it gets shut down and you're left with nothing. Let's see. The use of fraudulent admission letters have been a major concern for departments this year and continues to pose serious threat to the integrity of our student program, Miller said, adding international students are not to blame. The new rules comes as a welcome development for the National Association. Okay. So when it comes to things like international students, immigration, things of that sort, what ends up happening is these international students are made into scapegoats by the conservative right wing, but then they're also used by the liberal government as a way to prop themselves up to make them sound like they're so good at what they do. Oh, look, we're helping all these international students get, you know, an education because we're such a good party. But then the conservatives come in and then they start blaming everything on them. Housing issues, grocery prices. We're going to get into a really extreme story about this. But then they start just blaming all the problems on immigrants and international students, which stokes racism. I know, shocking that that would happen. And I've had so many conversations with people on the streets about housing prices saying, oh, it's all because of the immigrants. It's not. Okay, they are a factor. It is a strain on the system to constantly allow so many in, and it can be limited to help while we're in an affordability crisis, but it's not the factor, not by far. And the federal government and the provincial governments, they both have a job to do, and they are failing, partly on purpose, because it's the corporations that are buying up investments in housing and turning things into rental properties. It's the manufactured market, scarce market of housing. Rental prices here, well, Doug Ford got rid of rent controls in Ontario, so what do you think would happen? But then it all gets blamed on this one group of people, which leads to things like this.
Food banks have never been as important as they are today. In March, 2 million people used a Canadian food bank. But now some food banks aren't accommodating everyone anymore, and one type of client may no longer be welcome.
Is all these young kids coming with their backpacks saying they want help?
Here at St. Louis Outreach Food Bank in Brampton, students from outside the country aren't served anymore.
But they're just raiding anywhere to get anything they can. We can't handle that,
Yeah, all these international students, they're just coming in here and taking all of the food, and we can't handle that. They're raiding us, these international students.
No, everyone's running out of food.
Food Bank has a whiteboard out front during opening hours. It says government regulations allow it to exclude international students. But is there a policy? Somebody was telling my colleague that there's a policy.
I can give, it's on the window, sir.
The policy.
Yes.
The food bank posts a copy of what the government expects of international students coming to study here, that they be self-sufficient. Kenny, a Nigerian student who says he has a wife and daughter, showed up for food. He asked that his face not be shown. I asked why he didn't come with enough money.
I had a projection of how I was going to spend the money that I came in here with, but probably I didn't plan well. I don't know if I didn't plan well. I don't know if the economy was the opposite of what I thought it was.
The food bank's board president says they were told some international students have money in the bank.
There's been a lot of abuse with people that come with $50,000, $60,000 in the bank, and they just want to get free food.
Yeah, those international students, they're just so lazy. That's all they want. They just want free food. They have the money. We hear this time and time again, especially with conservatives, when it comes to things like theft and retail theft and all that sort of stuff. And they like to blame one group of people for the actions of, for the corporations and the government and, the capitalist system. These students do not come over here with that much money. I can guarantee you, they don't come over here with that much money. A lot of them don't. And they're not just looking for free handouts. Okay?
With 2,600 local families to help feed, she says the international students are too much. Food banks have seen foreign videos like this one online, describing food banks as a place to get free food.
So it's kind of a trend now that everyone's actually been advertised to just come here and immediately come to our doors. And we are bombarded.
Kenny is looking for another place to get help.
I'll have to go home and find a way to survive.
So the sacrifice that person made, bringing his family over here, bringing his hopes, he now can't afford to get groceries and might have to return home with nothing. That's how bad it's getting. And so we have here from the Waterloo Region Records, student accessing food banks increased by 220% in October. And this is significant in Waterloo region, because in Waterloo region, there's a couple universities, a few colleges, like it is a high student population. The thing is that this just becomes a way to demonize international students, to say that they want nothing but handouts, that they're coming here to get this, and that, if it wasn't for them, then there wouldn't be any problems and blah, blah, blah. No, the problem is that grocery food prices have gone absolutely out of control, which means fewer people are able to donate to food banks, and more people need the services of food banks. Not just students, but students in particular do, because most of them don't have much in the way of money. But it's easier for these right-wing conservatives to target international students and put the blame on them than it is to say that it's the Galen Westons out there that own all these grocery store chains that is making the cost of eating unaffordable for so many people. So just a little bit from this article. Waterloo region, the number of students accessing food assistance programs in the region has skyrocketed over the last year, according to monthly food bank data. More than 1,900 people who identified as students accessed food assistance in October in the region, an increase of 220% compared to last year, data from Food Bank of Waterloo region shows. However, because giving personal information to food banks is completely voluntary, the number of students could be higher than reported. The need for food assistance has been on the rise across all demographics in the region this year, as the region's food banks served more than 23,000 people in October. That's a 43% more than it helped in the same month in 2022. As a double-edged sword of inflation and interest rates increases forces people to make tough spending decisions, food banks have become an important resource for many. This article goes on to say that, unlike that other food bank, they make sure that people who need the food services, they'll hand it out. They're not going to restrict people because they're a student or anything of that sort. They're not going to do that, and that they'll help as many people as they can. But the reality is, we shouldn't have food banks. We shouldn't have the need for food banks in this country. And because Americans, you have food stamps, but here we have food banks. And every food bank is different because they're run municipally and independently for the most part, volunteers and all that sort of stuff. So each food bank will have its own requirements as to who can access food. So depending on the city you live in, you can have more access to food or not. But like I said, then the way with the cost of living is happening, there's been a massive increase in the demand for food banks across the country. And I know when I was mostly reliant on food banks, some of them had things like you had to volunteer with them in order to get food, which for somebody with my mental health issues at the time was very difficult for me to do, and people with other disabilities. And the fact that, you can go to a food bank, but if you're glucose intolerant, lactose intolerant, if you're diabetic, getting food to match your diet is nearly impossible. If you're a vegetarian, okay, you don't get a specialized menu. You don't get choice, and you get a lot of low quality, crappy food. But time and time again, the blame gets put on immigrants, on international students, when it comes to food banks being out of food, when it comes to rental properties increases going up. And it is the conservatives using them as a scapegoat and the liberals using them as a token. And some people might wonder, how is it that so many people over in India can get, tricked into coming over here to Canada? And I think people often underestimate the power of maple wash in this country, how bad it is. A lot of Canadians do not know how bad it has gotten in this country. But then let's take an example of somebody, maybe somebody a lot of us are familiar with. Sam Cedar. Every time he says Henson shavers. You know, it must be a Canadian thing because, you know, they're not looking to be the best business, they're looking to be the best razor. And that must be like a cute little Canadian thing. Despite how much I have called into that show to let him know that there's maple wash going on, that this country is not what you see, he still buys into it. It is not, you know, the idea of Henson Shaver being, you know, a shaving company, that is a Henson Shaver company thing. It is not a Canadian thing. Corporations in Canada are just as greedy, just as bad as American corporations, and in some instances, we are worse. Prime example of that, mining corporations all around the world. The mining corporations that are brutal, destroy land, you know, force entire villages and tribes to relocate, disappear people, have acts of violence towards towns if they interfere with their mining programs. More than half globally, mining corporations are Canadian owned. So Canada is responsible for those atrocities. And so even with all of this, that I try to call in and let Sam know, and he still buys into this maple washed idea of what Canada is. How is somebody in rural India, some kid, supposed to know the Canada brand he's being sold is a lie? Canada gets away with exploiting the world because of our maple washed image. And I am trying my best on my tiny little show to let people know what is really going on in this country, what we're really doing. And I don't want these poor kids to be coming over here and having their dreams crushed, having, you know, to come over here and face hate and discrimination. I don't want that for them. I do believe in immigration. I do believe that it should be easier in a lot of instances. But I don't want them coming over here to face the hatred, the disappointment, the poverty, the biases, and everything you see when they actually do make it over here and find out that this Canadian brand is a complete lie. So that was call 1 into the majority report. There was a second call that came in today. But before I get to that second call, let's check the Sandbox. Bad lefty, neoliberalism, yes. Big problem here. Shade Dragon, the U.S.'s public services are literally contracted out to a for-profit international corporation, publicly traded on the NYSE and owned mostly by financial services corporations, wealthy management corporations. Yes, international corporations are one of the driving factors around this world for economy and capitalism and destruction and horror and, you know, the end times with climate change and all that sort of stuff. Let's see. Shade Dragon, whoa, so if you're a hungry kid, fuck you, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty much what that woman was saying. Because it's not that they're going there because, you know, international students aren't going to the food bank because they want free food. They just want food because they're hungry and they're starving. And the conditions that they're often forced to live in with the housing situations and stuff are just so dire and disgusting that, you know, they're not clean homes. There's mold. There's issues with maintenance. There's no privacy. Nobody should be living like that. And they're forced to. And then they come over here without knowing how much money it's going to need for groceries, for healthcare, for all these extra expenses. And they're in dire situations, but they might be so determined to want to get that education that they try to put up with it as long as they can. MIDI doctors, I want free food. Yeah, I'm all for that. Like, I do believe that food, you know, a healthy diet should be a right. That it should be a thing, you know. Canada should be offering that to its people, you know, socialized housing, socialized groceries. That should be a thing. Because we definitely have the money and the means in this country. Articus among us, if you can't afford food, how is a return ticket remotely affordable? Yeah. Brenda Knoll, we have no food banks too. Yes, because food banks are municipally run and stuff like that. And if you're in a small town, they might not even have one. You might have to rely on your church if you have a church that's so generous. I once turned to a church because they were giving out like $30 checks or something like that for food. But then it's like, oh, but you can't buy this, 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 and this, and this with it. You know? Like your autonomy in your choice get taken away. And God forbid that you want to get something that brings you a little bit of joy, like a chocolate bar or something like that. Medi Doctor, sorry to be a Debbie Downer. Most people don't even know Canada has a brand. It's not so much a brand. It's about just the image, the maple washed image of being the good, polite society. Tim Hortons, that's our brand, pretty much. But just this idea that we're so free and socialized and everything is so good up here. And yeah, like just the idea that Sam Cedar can think to himself that, oh, since Henson Shaver just wants to be the best shaving company and not just, you know, make money for the sake of making money, then that must be a Canadian thing, right? No, no, it is not. Shade Dragon, unfortunately, food stamps here are nowhere near adequate to feed someone. And it's the same with the food banks because quite often a lot of them allow you to go once or twice a month and you're given a pantry that is maybe 3 days worth of groceries or food, you know. It's, yeah. Morbius Dragon, food, housing, clothing, and health insurance should be a human right. We shouldn't have to pay for any of it. I believe that the government should be supplying everything we need to survive and thrive. I definitely believe that. Okay, let's get into the other story that happened today on the Majority Report. So today there was another call into the Majority Report about, hey, Canada, we're up here, you know, we matter, and it's pretty sucky up here, and can you say hi to us, Sam Cedar? Can you give Canada a shout out? Can you give us some attention? Huh, Sam? Sam, can you do that? Sam? Huh?
The clip I had got deleted from the Rogan. It just
I don't care about that one, really.
Sorry.
Who cares about Kid Rock? Yeah, this is why we got to pull down those clips. All right, let's go to the phones. Calling from a 604 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Himmat. I'm from Canada.
Hemant from Canada. What's on your mind?
Just the rise of the far right in Canada. I don't know if you I think you got a caller a couple of days ago too. He was talking about international students in Canada and how a lot of there's a lot of hate against Indians in Canada.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm an Indian myself, and then I just see that we don't really have a strong left in terms of media.
Me, I'm right here. I am right here. I am doing the best that I can. Me, left of the box, Canadian progressive media on the left. I'm right here here. Hello. Hi. Bonjour? Salut? Hi! I'm right here! Ah!
Like compared to like you guys down there, like we need someone like you who kind of like mocks the far right, who kind of, because we have a lot of like a lot of outlets like Rebel News and like True North that really focus on like immigration as like a problem, and immigrants as a problem. I'm born in Canada, and like growing up, like it wasn't really that bad in terms of like racism and stuff. Like Canada actually used to like really pride itself to being different than America. But like I feel like since Trump came in, like it's really emboldened like a far right here.
Yeah.
And like we kind of need help. Like we have the serfs and like the rational national guy,
And you have me.
but like I just don't see them really talking about Canada that much, and they're just leaving like this huge window open for the far right. And I think they're really.
I love this point in the video. You can't see it off to the side now, but the chat just has a whole bunch of left of the boxes. Thank you, MIDI Doctors, for doing that. MIDI Doctors wasn't the only one. I was also in there. I'm just saying that I'm right here. But the chat got spammed with left of the box at this point.
Winning. Like the Conservatives are probably going to win the next election, and the leader isn't like really like saying the far right stuff, but he's like winking at them. Like he's not totally condemning them too. So like there is a problem up here, and like we need help.
Well, I can't move up there at the time for the moment. But left of the box, Sandy does a great job on.
Oh, he said my name. Sorry. He knows who I am.
On the Canadian stuff, and I don't know. You know, you got maybe you should do it yourself.
Yeah, I mean the problem is there's a little bit of problem with
Appreciate the
incentives.
call.
Like I would like to cover covering national is just more money and more clicks and that stuff. We have this video. There's some weird thing getting, so we're downloading.
Yes, I'm trying my best up here to get. But the caller is right. There has been an increase in racism in this country, and I have been touching on that a fair bit on my channel. But some things that have popped up recently in the news on this subject. Let's go here.
To a landmark legal ruling now on the 5 life sentences handed down to a self-described white nationalist who intentionally drove his truck into a Muslim family in London, Ontario.
This was a horrifying story. And just recently, it has been determined that this person was basically a terrorist targeting Muslims specifically. We'll get more into it.
The judge said the attack represented an act of terrorism, the first time that finding has been made against a far-right extremist in Canada. CTV's Nick Paparella on the pivotal day and the deep and lingering pain.
So I decided, all right, this is it. I'm gonna commit a terrorist attack.
After being found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder, Justice Renee Pomerantz agreed with what Veltman told police, saying, "I find the offender's actions constitute terrorist activity." Justice Pomerantz ruled that this was a planned and deliberate attack aimed at intimidating a segment of society, the Muslim community.
And to the terrorist, your hate may have taken 4 beautiful lives and almost a 5th, but it will not win.
For Afzal family members, the ruling is a small sense of relief.
Missing our family that should have been here and are not, and something that we'll be working through processing as time goes on.
Veltman, a white nationalist, was already facing 4 concurrent life sentences for the murders, and Justice Pomerantz gave him an additional life sentence for the attempted murder of the young boy who survived the attack. The terrorism designation makes it far tougher for Veltman to be released from prison even after serving 25 years. His defense team didn't rule out an appeal in this case.
We'll see whether we'll get instructions from our client about whether or not there'll be an appeal.
2.5 years after the brutal incident, a memorial now stands as a constant reminder of what happened. Those who became known as our London family may be gone, but they will never be forgotten.
Every time I pass by, I remember her. So the memories, they don't close.
Nick Paparella, CTV News, London, Ontario.
So just a little bit more on that for people who aren't familiar with this story. So this is from the London Free Press. We're not talking about England. We're talking about Ontario. Yes, Ontario has London, Paris, Fergus. Kitchener used to be called New Berlin, but they changed their name for some reason back during the Second World War to Kitchener. So, judge finds mass murderer committed terrorism. A London judge has decided that the mass murder crimes amounted to terrorism. Let's go. From the beginning of the Superior Court Regional Senior Justice René Pomerantz decision to sentence this person to life in prison, she declared she wouldn't say his name and never did once, so not to give him any of his desired publicity for murdering 4 members of a London Muslim family and attempting to murder a 9-year-old boy left orphaned. But what the self-described white nationalist and college dropout did, she said, was a textbook case of terrorist motive and intent. When hate-filled violence is directed at some of us, it is a crime against all of us, Pomerantz said. It tears at the fabric of our society. Pomerantz made clear off the top what this person did when he drove his souped-up Dodge Ram pickup truck into a family on June 6, 2021, did constitute terrorist activity, and hoped her decision would help quell a sense of fear and intimidation that has lingered since the attack. It is my hope the judicial process will, through a denunciation of the offender's action, send a different message to the community, namely that there is no place in Canada society for hatred and racism that spawned the offender's actions on June 6, 2021. The person stood when asked and listened without emotion to the judge's decision. He said nothing during the decision or when he was led away. It's marked a this is the final chapter in what's been a long issue. So, murdered were, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to pronounce these names. I'm terribly, terribly sorry. But Talat, 74, her son, Salman, 46, his wife, Madia, 44, and their daughter, Yaman, 15. The couple's then 9-year-old son was seriously injured but survived. So those are the victims of this terrorist. The family was on an evening spring walk and was standing at the northwest London intersection when this person wearing an army helmet, body armor, and armed with weapons inside the truck he had recently purchased ran over them. Just an absolutely tragic, tragic story. And there's been more incidences of hate. There's been an increase in hate crimes. There's been an increase in, attacks against synagogues and mosques. And the racism in this country has been amped up partly because of Donald Trump. There's Trumpism up here in Canada. The right-wing MAGA crowd is here in Canada too, and they're being fired up, and our right-wing conservative politicians play into it. They really do. Like, Pierre Poilievre absolutely plays into right-wing stuff. I believe, where was it? Was it actually on the call? Saying that Pierre Poilievre, I can't remember, I remember hearing it, that saying that the conservative leader isn't necessarily playing into these right-wing conspiracy things, but he isn't denouncing them either. But the reality is he is playing into them. Our right-winger leaders are, like Danielle Smith had Tucker Carlson up on stage with her while they talked replacement theory, conspiracy theory. Pierre Poilievre has come out staunchly anti-trans and says that he will do everything he can in his power to make it so that trans women can't exist in public. It is scary times up here, and this right-wing rhetoric is just being, you know, maximized, energized. There's a word in my brain in particular that I want to think of for this, partly because of the states. Well, mostly because I'm just going to blame everything on America. It's easier. So from Twitter, we have Bridget. If you're still doubting if racism exists in Canada, take some time to go through the comments section. Racists are upset that Ontario is adding the long overdue mandatory Black history learning to students' courses. They can cry more. I have not actually read these comments. Let's see. Let's see how I do not doubt her. I've seen what some of these comments under posts like this look like before, so I do not doubt her, but let's take a peek. So, Ontario adding mandatory Black history learning to grades 7, 8, and 10 history courses. And I've covered this ages and ages ago. Actually, I think I did a Rebel HQ video about it. About Bill 168. Wow, I can't remember. I can't believe I actually remember the name. It was Bill 168, put forth by Laura May Lindo. And it was basically to do the whole what the right wing is worried about, the CRT, you know, here in Canada. But it really was just to be like, no, let's actually add accurate history of Black people here in Canada to the curriculum at, you know, certain grades. It wasn't CRT, critical race theory, so much. So, so Ontario adding mandatory Black history learning to grade 7, 8, and 10 history courses. And here's Bridget saying again, this is good news, racists can cry more. And people who are upset about kids learning about the past history, especially Black history, should be ashamed of themselves. The point of school education is to learn about things like the world and local history and art. Okay, so quite often for me, the top ones will be a little bit more friendly because I've really cultivated my Twitter feed. So let's see. Okay, here we go. Isn't it called history? What's with the coloring coding? Our government is turning everyone into racists. Okay, now give Black students in grades 7, 8, and 10 mandatory history lessons on what the impact of living a life of crime has on you. They don't know how to add and subtract, but they will know they are oppressed. Wow, this will definitely help students succeed in life. Somebody's just asking why. Students can go right from their Ojibwe class to their Black history class, then right to history where they learn all about how Canada is a genocidal colonizer. Doesn't exactly work like that. Good, look what this place is like because this is the only thing now in 2024. Don't even know what that means. Somebody saying, oh no, this is actually a good thing. Something about it just the government moving it to Staples and privatizing it, basically, what Doug Ford has done. Somebody agreeing. We've had some pretty bad comments about it already, but just this person saying, I'm almost 27. I didn't learn anything about Black people in Canada until Viola Desmond was put on the $10 bill. Everything else I learned was through research for my degree. Y'all should have been teaching kids this because they deserve to know, especially Black kids. I agree. It was not taught. When Bam was on my show, on the live stream, we were talking about how Africville was pretty much wiped out during the Halifax explosion, but they didn't receive the same help for some reason as the rest of Halifax when it came to rebuilding and things of that sort. Let's see. Somebody puking gif. This person saying, may I suggest to Moss with darker skin history to call in groups of humans by their skin color and should be interpreted as inherently racist. This is the practice that led to historical problems in the first place. Yeah, just people basically saying that because we're going to broaden our history classes that and include an aspect that has been left out of it for the entire history of education, we're finally going to add it, that suddenly that is racist. That is a lot of insecure white people. But let's see. Oh, right, I was going to do that. Oh, sorry. I was looking up at my docket. There was something I was going to cover, but I think I'll leave it for next time because we're already pretty late into this. Oh, I did want to cover this today as well. So that's it for the toque part. I'm no longer talking about majority report stuff, but like I said, I'm trying my best to get noticed, to make a majority report of the North, so to say, you know? You know, I think I make majority report look good. You know, tell me what you think. Eh? Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That looks good. The majority report now with CanCon, huh? Can that happen? Can that happen? That would be nice. I'm just saying, you know, apparently the majority report has a large Canadian audience wanting Canadian content from time to time. Why not give the people what they want? Should give the people what they want. I just wanted to bring attention to this story quickly, and then we'll start wrapping up. But this one caught my eye for the reasons it's horrible to begin with, but also because I had something very similar. I covered something along these lines not too long ago.
A New Westminster Comedy Club has canceled a planned show that some say is offensive, including the families of victims of convicted serial killer Robert Pickton. The situation even caught the attention of the Premier.
I just really encourage this group to think carefully about this sad attempt at humor.
The group is Danger Cats, a comedy act touring across Canada and boasting a big social media presence. Some of their material has caused outcry, including using residential schools as a punchline, and the shirt they've sold making a joke out of Pickton victims. Pickton was convicted of killing 6 women, although the DNA of 33 was found on the site of his farm.
He is Canada's most notorious serial killer.
Many of his victims were Indigenous. Lorelei Williams, whose cousin Tanya Holick was named as one of Pickton's victims, says the group has caused hurt and offense.
It has caused a lot of heartache and pain, especially the t-shirt referring to my cousin as a flavor. Like, yeah, it's been horrifying. It's very disturbing.
Danger Cats were set to perform in New Westminster next month at Rick Bronson's House of Comedy, but now the show will not go on. The club issued a statement on Facebook, but it's no longer visible. That statement said it prioritized the well-being of staff, performers, and patrons, and while it values free expression, it realized the material caused discomfort, which was not the club's goal. When reached, organizers had no comment, other than the show is off. Danger Cats shows in Winnipeg were also canceled recently.
For me, I'm just tired of seeing material like this and people thinking it as if it's like art.
And some local Indigenous comedians say they're glad the show here will also not go on.
I'm tired of people trying to normalize abuse against women, violence, racism, homophobia, transphobia.
Mark agrees comedy can tackle tough subject matter, even trauma, if the approach is right.
First and foremost, like, trauma isn't, especially if it's not your trauma, it's not a punchline. You know, residential schools isn't a punchline to your joke. If you want to bring awareness to this topic and you want to do it through comedy, I think it is very possible, even if you are a white comedian, to talk about this issue from your perspective and to talk about what that all meant and how that also affected you or your community.
William says she's glad the show is canceled, but was hoping for an apology from the club.
Well, one of the words was discomfort. It caused discomfort. It's like, no, you caused harm and pain.
Danger Cats posted a statement to Instagram. They say they are canceling multiple shows in Canada and the US. Members say they and the venues they were meant to play have received threatening messages. As for the Picton shirt, they say it has been removed from their store, and they're donating proceeds to Ukraine. CBC News reached out to the group, but didn't hear back right away. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Like, just the thought that they thought that was okay to do is absolutely disgusting. And part of the reason why it caught my eye was not only was it so completely disgusting, was not too long ago I covered a story here about a comedy stand-up show. It was a fundraiser for the Friends of the IDF in Toronto at Yuck Yuck's Comedy Club. And Judy Gold was one of the performers in that. So having a comedy show about supporting a genocidal occupation force, that's okay. Apparently. Like, I agree that this comedy group trying to make light of Robert Picton and his victims, that should have been canceled. So should have the one encouraging genocide. But it is just, like, I'm one of the people where I believe that there can be comedy in trauma and stuff, but it's not appropriate for people outside of those specific traumas to be making jokes of it, I don't think, because it takes a lot of firsthand experience, I think. I joke about mental health and suicidal ideation because I suffer from it a lot. And I've been told you're supposed to laugh at your failures. Ha ha. See, that's a joke there. And I do have a lot of dark jokes about my mental health. And part of it is just a way to vent. Part of it is a way for me to process it, to understand it, to make it less scary to me at times, I guess. Like, the one joke that I always have, it's my feeler joke, my joke to gauge where people are at when it comes to my humor. And that is, let's do it this way. I love peanut butter and chocolate so much, it's the only thing that will get me off the bridge. Some people will understand that joke, other people won't. But I think it's just, it's a way to release tension sometimes. It's a way to express yourself and take ownership over what has happened, what you go through, to let people know it doesn't run your life. But just this idea of this comedy group poking fun at the victims of the most notorious serial killer in this country, primarily Indigenous women, is just so disgusting that they thought that they could get away with it. That the venue even accepted it in the first place. I'm not. You know, I'm one of the people, I'm fine that we don't have absolute free speech in this country. I'm good with that. I think there should be some restrictions, and something like that Yeah, just shouldn't happen. Let's put it that way. Anyway, let's check the sandbox. Bad Lefty, Sam isn't that naive. I'm not entirely sure what you're talking about. That he still buys into. Oh, you think the Henson's shaver thing is a script? I'm not entirely sure. I don't think it's a script. It's a Henson shaving thing. It is not a Canadian thing. You know, Canada is not that altruistic. Shade Dragon. Also, nobody mentions the maid system. It's so dysfunctional. I talk about it a lot on my channel because as somebody who lives with mental health issues, it's been up there. I've been meaning to do a follow-up because I talked about when Raybana was on my channel. I mentioned it. And I've been meaning to do a follow-up about them delaying the expansion because in March it's supposed to be expanded to people whose sole condition is mental health issues. And that legislation was supposed to be tabled. As far as I know, it still hasn't actually gone through. So I have to look at that and see if there's any updates to that story. But I wanted to go through it in more detail, but like on a separate stream because it's a bit of a heavy subject. Or a stream that's kind of more devoted specifically to that. Fiona came from the Majority Report. Welcome to the Left of the Box. I got a shout out today. I'm a little bit giddy over it. Okay. Sam Cedar said my name. He knows who I am. Zero PE. I wonder if that caller even took the time to subscribe to the channel. I hope they did. It'd be handy if there was a link to my channel in their description box. It'd be nice. MIDI doctors, phone in more Sandy. It's not that I don't try. I call in a fair bit. I get picked up on very little. I was planning on actually just calling in today to follow up on the call from Monday, but I walked away from my phone for 5 seconds, and when I came back and dialed the number, the lines were full. Like it is very challenging to get through to the Majority Report. You basically have to keep on calling before he's announced that the phone lines are open because there's a delay of about 23 seconds, not that I've counted. And so you kind of have to just keep on randomly trying to call in to find out when it's open, because by the time he's actually announced phone lines are open, they're full. It's full. Like it is hard to get through, and then once you do get through, you can be on hold for hours and get nothing. And this can happen for weeks and weeks. And I have tried to get through before. Sometimes time-sensitive things can't get through. It is really difficult to get through. And it's not like it's a bad thing. It just means that they're getting more popular, which is a good thing. It's a good thing that they're getting so popular. I'm just saying, I could help them get more popular, you know? you know? Appeal to the Canadian audience. Have somebody who is part of the LGBTQ plus community to talk about, you know, the horrendousness that is everything in the United States and all their anti-queer legislation. Just saying. It's not like it's the first time I've suggested. I did a video a while ago about hiring me for the AM quickies. Back when they used to be audio. I thought that would be fun. But it was more just to bring attention to a bill that was being passed up here in Canada. Online content creators would be in trouble, and we will be. And how people broadcasting into Canada, even through the internet, might need to get like CanCon requirements if they want to stay relevant in the algorithms. Although I would never qualify for CanCon. And for those of you who don't know, that's called Canadian content. And in our broadcasting, radio, TV, and stuff like that, there has to be a certain percentage that is Canadian made. Or Canadian stamp of approval, because there's a whole thing about it, but it's basically the government's way of controlling our culture. Vanessa Maldonado, sorry. I don't do names. Well, they are not wrong. It always amazes me how white people are so freaking bitch-ass snowflakes that they cannot accept what they have done is objectively genocide and colonialism. That is this government in a nutshell. Canada was built on genocide and white supremacy. Quite literally, that was part of it, to wipe out all Indigenous peoples. That was part of what they wanted to do, and they're still, in a way, working on it. Indie doctors, if I could get in every week, trust me, I would. But I try to limit it to when I actually have something constructive to add, as opposed to, I just want to talk Canadian. And also, I hate calling in. I've talked about it before, but I despise calling into the Majority Report. It's an autistic anxiety thing. I do much better over video. Like if I can see their faces, because I'm not even... There's a delay, so I can't watch the screen while I'm talking to them because the screen is about 23 seconds behind. I despise calling in. It causes me a lot of anxiety. But if I were able to have like a video call, then that I could handle. That I'd be a lot better at. Azira Eden, they are not humorous. They are shock jocks. Pathetic. Yeah, that comedy troupe just... And yeah, a bunch of white men sitting around thinking, oh, wouldn't this be funny if we did this and made this t-shirt? And oh, look, we're so outrageous. We're so loud. We're so bold. It's like, no, no, it's horrible. It jumped. Where were we? Bad lefty, yuck yucks, very yuck. Yes, I have a video about it. I have a video about yuck yucks and having the Friends of the IDF fundraiser stand-up comedy show. Just, yeah. You can see the video. I clipped it, and I was very disappointed when I actually saw the poster, a good quality poster. Because when I originally clicked on it on Yuck Yuck's website, I couldn't enlarge the poster, but when I found a new one and I saw the name on it, it was like, oh, Judy Gold from The Majority Report, whom the last time she was on was before October 7th. I'd be very surprised if she is welcome back on at this point. Going on a comedy tour to raise money for the IDF is just, Zero PE. Sandy is a good model in their gear, lol. I think so too. I have a few pictures of me in their gear. Well, part of it is when I went on my Boston trip, there was just that joke about scarf and toque because I had sent an IM into the Majority Report. It's all there. But basically, way back when they had their live show, and just about a month before it was supposed to happen, they postponed it because of COVID. And I had sent in an IM saying, you know, I understand why you're doing it, and I appreciate you guys postponing it because you're taking your fans' safety into consideration. And I say that as somebody who is out about $100 because I had to, what's the term? Fast pace I didn't have a passport, so I had to pay to get it fast tracked. And not only that, what turned out was my birth certificate was too damaged to use, so I needed a new birth certificate. So at the time, I thought, you know what, might as well update my birth certificate to reflect my gender, being non-binary, so X. So that meant that I had to, priority mail out my documents to 2 different locations in Alberta because of course I was born in Alberta. You know, it's not like it's going to be convenient and I was born in Ontario to change my documentation. And then I had to get that all done, and then I fast-tracked the passport in order for to make sure that I would have that on time in order to get down into the States for the January show. And then they postponed it. And so, I was saying, and like all the fees to get all that fast-tracked and stuff like that was about $100. But I said I was fine with it. Because of that reason, but I said, you can make it up to me by making sure there's a scarf and toque for me at the show. And he was so flustered, Sam was so flustered with the word toque, because he didn't know what it was, and it's spelled Toque. And I knew he would mess it up, but he was so flustered, he missed the part in the IM where I said, so I can buy them. So it sounded like I was just asking for a handout of merch. But then I ended up getting a handout of merch because I got to meet Julie, Sam's sister at the show, and she had a scarf and a toque for me. And I also bought the t-shirts. So I have a long video about my trip to the Boston live show and the portrait I drew of Sam to give to him. And in it, I did some modeling pictures of the Majority Report merch that I had. And for the holidays, I got more Majority Report merch. So I've been thinking of maybe doing some more modeling pictures of them. They're just fun. But yeah, I think I make Majority Report look good. Azira Eden, ditto on the dark humor. Yeah. Articus Among Us, laugh when you can, even if you feel like crying. Yeah, I've been in some really dark times and still end up joking. But the thing, I make people upset when I do this sometimes because they know I'm hurting and I'm in a really dark place, but then I'll say something and it is funny, and then they'll feel bad because they laugh at it. Because I'm usually saying something about my situation, and it's like, no, it's okay. You can laugh even though I feel horrible, you can laugh right now when I make a joke. Because it's not like I'm sitting there making a joke. I'm just very fluid in sarcasm, and it just kind of comes out, and it's very deadpan. So it can be confusing as to people wondering what kind of reaction I can get. I'm expecting. Plus, it seems really odd that somebody in such a dark situation would be laughing about that. But I have some jokes about all of that. MIDI doctors having a fundraiser for the IDF. It's like having a fundraiser for the Waffen SS. Yeah. Just really disappointed to see that Judy Goat was part of that. Vanessa, I'm also happy that there is no religious freedoms where I live. Allowing free religious expression is too broad of a concept that allows bigots to justify their bigotry with religion. Shade Dragon, the maid system is one of the reasons I don't plan on going expat to Canada. I don't really feel comfy in the US as a non-binary person anymore, though. Yeah, again, I was talking with Bam about it, and I'm very nervous about going to the United States because my driver's license has X on it for my gender, and if I were to ever get questioned by the police or pulled over, it really is case by case as to how they would react to seeing that on my license. But overall, I'd much rather be in Canada than in the United States. And maid is not something you have to worry about. Like, that shouldn't be the reason why you don't come to Canada. There are issues, big issues with it that I have. I'll get into it in a different stream. I believe in the premise of maid. I'm very not happy with how they've rolled it out, and the fact that, you know, they may expand maid to include people with soul condition and mental health before that is included in universal health care in Canada is just unconscionable. Let's see. About to sleep. CanCon? I explained it. Canadian content. It's a thing in Canada. Yeah. So, YouTube shows broadcasting into Canada, depending on the size and stuff, might need like a certain amount of CanCon. It is very... There are issues with CanCon. I'm sure Sam would know what that means, though, because he was in show business and even did some acting in Toronto. So I'm fairly certain he would know what CanCon is. Let's see. Oh, night, Medi Doctors. Thanks for all of your support and all the shout outs on Majority Report and stuff, but you're probably already to bed because I believe you're over in the UK. Articus Among Us. TYT aired a segment where a Trump fan said that all of the Dem options, jank is preferable. Somehow they think that's a positive endorsement, more so an indictment of their centrist position. Yeah, I don't know if I would want people who would vote for Pierre Poilievre look at me and be like, you know, but that Sandy person, I'd vote for her too, you know. Pierre Poilievre or Sandy. It really, they're both good. It's just like, you probably then have too much in common. Not, I wouldn't want to be bragging about that. Shade Dragon, did TYT cover the next Benedict issue? I have no idea. I don't watch TYT anymore. I covered it a fair bit. I might need to do another segment on it because more stuff has been coming out, and I think, yeah, it was just other people saying that Nex's pronouns were actually he, him versus they, them. And it's just the mother was using they, them because she was still getting adjusted to the new pronouns and stuff. I don't know. It's a bit confusing, but I don't think that story is over. And I have 2 large segments that I covered on it because I am non-binary myself. Yeah. Boom. There we go. Zero PE. I always remind myself and others that Cenk used to be a lifelong Republican. I guess once right wing, always somewhat right wing. I'd like to believe people can change. I don't know if he's one of them, but I'd like to believe people can change. Vanessa, did you see Chank's response to the uncommitted vote? I appreciate and have respect for the people organizing uncommitted campaign, but if you want to change, you should vote for me. Yeah, I have a little video that you can go check out on my channel that actually states very plainly what my views are on his presidency run. As in, it is fraud. I consider it fraud. If you want to run for president, go ahead. I don't care. But asking people for money for your campaign before you've been proven to even be allowed to run, given his status of not being naturally born American, that to me is fraud. If he were to run on the premise of getting rid of that rule, okay. But that's not why he's running. And he's not really doing much of a message campaign. He's picking little messages here and there, but there's not one solid reason why you could look at him and say, this is why he's running. Oops. Shade Dragon to 0 PE. Yeah, being a Pam Polly pagan MB wasn't exactly conducive to great family relations with a Roman Catholic conservative, partially immigrant family. Ouch. Yeah. I am very fortunate that I am pansexual, non-binary, and my mom, it's a moot point to her. She doesn't care. She's fine. And to my sister. And all my friends are queer, so it's good with them. More people wondering what CanCon is. I just said CanCon stands for Canadian Content. It is... I've joked about it in other videos, but it's something people in showbiz in North America would know. And it is a requirement for radio and television broadcasting into Canada. You need a certain amount of Canadian content. So all of our radio stations, a certain percentage of it literally has to be songs by Canadian artists. Yeah, it is, there has to be a certain amount of Canadian influence on a movie or something of that sort, or if they're going to be filming in Canada. It's a thing. It's a thing. Rest in power, next Benedict. I think that is what actually I wanted to talk about too when I talk about next is the discourse around using the phrase rest in power. Okay. Okay, I think that is all for today. I had a little bit more on my docket, but I've been at this for quite some time. Thank you everyone for coming out. I super appreciate it. Wasn't necessarily planning on doing a live stream today. Like I said, I was planning on working on something else that I wanted to get done soon. So I may not have a live stream on Friday. I don't know yet. Because I want to work on this. It's a video that I want to do for my channel, like a video essay, a scripted one. And I just want to get that off my plate. So I might be working on that. But yeah, I super appreciate everyone coming out. Let's do the thing. Oh, not that one. This one. This one, this one, this one. Oops, that one. Okay. You know the drill at this point. You know, please, if you can, become a patron. Only if you can. I don't want people sacrificing money that they need to support me. I'm primarily still on the hostile fart sauna known as Twitter. Okay, known as X, formerly Twitter, which I still call Twitter. I have lots of art that I have these overlapping, don't I? Art at SandeeLovas.com. Please go check it out. I also have a senior cat who has kidney issues and needs medication in regular vet treatments. So any help covering his vet bills would be greatly appreciated. He's doing okay right now. I appreciate all the mods in the channel. I appreciate everyone coming out. I also have an Amazon wishlist linked in the description box below where you can, if you want to give me a sweet treat, I put so much chocolate on there right now because of Easter. Easter is my favorite candy holiday. That's the only reason why I celebrate Easter, is for all the candy. The certain chocolates and stuff that come out only around Easter. I love it. And yeah, hopefully, if you want to see me on other shows, please bug them to get me on. I try reaching out. I don't have the contact information for everyone to actually be able to reach out. I think that's mostly what I wanted to say. I'm still a little bit giddy. Sam Cedar said my name today. Also, share and like and on the clips that I upload, please just pretend watch them. Like click on them, mute them, put them in our window to help get them. I'm trying to get them all over at least 100 views to help in the algorithms. Also, if you comment under everything, that helps in the algorithms. Thank you to the people who have been doing it. I've been noticing a little bit of a boost in that, as I will try to clip this as soon as possible to get the videos out. And I think that was it. I think that's it. I think that is it. And I keep on getting distracted by chat. I should stop looking. Okay. Let's just do this official. Salut, à la prochaine. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandy, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today.